Hello, students. During our virtual class time today, we went over this assignment. So we started by reviewing what we read and practicing the skills from Module 1. What that means is that we read this excerpt of text right here, and we read that to understand what the author is saying by using and pulling 5 different keywords from the text. So what you'll be doing is that you'll read through this excerpt of text from the article that we read last week, and then identify 5 different keywords from that chunk of text that are the most important. So in this case, you might choose dogs, restaurant, nuisance, and children. For our last one, you might choose allow. From there, you'll use those 5 words to answer the question, what is the author saying? Now remember, this skill is more critical and more in depth than just summarizing. So, what that means is we're evaluating the text. Think of it as when you choose a coat because it's cold outside. You choose that because of an observation you make. Well, these 5 words are the observations that we just made of what the author is doing. So we're going to use those 5 words to create that what the author is saying. So for this section, our author saying might look like this: dogs in restaurants, notice I'm pulling from that column, are not a nuisance because they, and I'm coming back to this text, because they can be restrained by a collar. Children cannot. So the author in this chunk in text is saying dogs in restaurants are not a nuisance because they can be restrained by a collar. Children are allowed in a restaurant and are not restrained and are still allowed. Notice how I'm evaluating what the author is saying. Next step that we practiced in class today, what is the author doing? In this case, looking at the green box, choose one of these items from the green box and then copy and paste it into the chart from here. I'm going to model that for you. Again, here is our text that we have from slide number 2, copied and pasted because we're continuously focusing on that chunk of text. In that chunk of text, I believe the author is showing the understanding of the topic's context. I write that here. I copy and paste it. That's all I have to do. The next step is name which of the 4 intentions the author is doing in this text. Are they motivating us? Are they telling us the consequences? Are they giving us the implications? Or are they explaining the significance? Well, I have this great tool to help me of what the author is saying. It's the shortcut. In what the author is saying, dogs in restaurants are not a nuisance because they can be restrained by a collar. Children are allowed in a restaurant and are not restrained are still allowed. I believe that in that chunk of text, the author is saying the significance, why it's so important that dogs be allowed in restaurants. So I write my explanation here. The author is, I pull that from that green square, showing understanding of the topics context by, or sorry, it could be a period, or you could put by to have a complex sentence, by showing the significance of why dogs should be allowed in restaurants. So notice how so much depends on that what the author is saying skill because I used some of that vocabulary even in my explanation. Okay, next thing that we practiced in our virtual class today is we talked to inform our opinions. So looking at these two charts, we talked to one another about what information does this graphic communicate about germs in dogs. There was this graphic that we observed and this graphic that we observed. From the observation of those two graphics, we were able to come to a resolution that helped us explain the significance of that section of text compared to the graphics that we read. So when we look back, the significance of the text is this chunk of text that you've already been continuing to read throughout this entire assignment. Now that we know what the author's saying, what the author's doing, we're going to explain how it connects to this graphic and this graphic by comparing the two. So for this part of the assignment, you compare and contrast using these sentence starters to create a paragraph. So in this case, I use my knowledge from what the author's saying and what the author's doing, the text that we already read, and I write 7 sentences that are a compare and contrast. So let me model that. Dogs and humans are alike because, and then looking at this slide right here and this slide right here, I'm going to be able to create that comparison, that similarity. How are dogs and humans alike? So I got to use these two slides frequently and go back to them because as you can see, it's circled here in blue. That gives me the information. It tells me exactly my interpretation of those, tells me exactly how humans and dogs are alike. If you want to use the word children here, you're welcome to. Over here is a keyword bank that if you would like to use it in creating that comparison and contrasting statements, you're welcome to use that as well. So overall, our whole class time was spent reviewing what the author's saying and what the author's doing. If you would like, you can use these tools here to help you write those items. So, or to help write that response. Because of course yours won't have the same answer as mine. First, find the most important who or what it is about, that this passage right here, and then tell what is important about that who or what. In this case, we said that dogs, restaurant, nuisance, children, and allow were the important who and what. Be sure to use these two slides to help you build your comparisons and your contrasts. Read those slides to yourself and interpret them. And then lastly, create that great 7-sentence paragraph by using these keywords, these two slides in your interpretation, and what the author is doing and what the author is saying. That's how the entire assignment is wrapped all into itself. If you would like to go on, next week we're going to be creating the conclusion to a scientific argument. And if you want to do slide 11 and 12, you're more than welcome to. That's what we did in virtual class today.